We are going to take you on a roller coaster journey of emotions. We've been very fortunate to capture 4 generations of employment journey of the Bangladeshi community here in Birmingham, from Lascars to manufacturers to the catering industry, and then branching out to professional sectors. It's been an emotional journey for us to hear all of these stories. So what we want you to do now is relax and enjoy all of the stories that we've captured for you.
You know, things were tight at home. You know, I grew up with bare minimum. You know, I had one pair of shoes to last me throughout sun, rain, winter, whatever. You know, if my shoes got wet, you know, I wore wet shoes the following day. There was no options, and I would say, you know, the only time I had a second pair of shoes is when I started working. And the other nice thing of work was that I was able to contribute. I got paid £16. And I got to keep £6 and £10 I had to give to my mum.
I came to the UK when I was 7 years old, and I came with my mum and dad and one brother. My dad was here. My dad came to the UK in 1962. He's never had any intention to bring us here. It was only in the late 70s that when he saw his friends bring family members over here, he decided to bring us over here as well.
I'm so amazed and mesmerized how, you know, like you said, his English is still, it's not very fluent. He understands basic stuff, but I just feel so in awe and unbelievable at how they traveled 8,000 miles. They didn't have language, they didn't know where they were going, how they were going. And I just think they're so brave, and none of us can ever, you know, when we go on holiday, how many times do you check what's there, how to do things, where you got to, you know, so many checklists.
আমি তো বলা এই তো শাড়ি খামতাম কেউ নাই হাই তো হাই ইংলিশ আমার কেন কম আছে হারি ইংলিশ আমি তো হাই খামতাম তার স্কার্ট কিনতো আর আমি তার দিকে রাইতাম
The only time that I would probably just about see my dad was on the weekends. Even though that we lived in the same house, so my dad would probably leave about 3:30, which is just about the time that I come back from school, so I wouldn't see him then. And then he used to come back late, about 1 a.m. 2 a.m, which I'm asleep.
So I was born here. My family, originally granddad first came over, and then dad was born in Bangladesh and moved here when he was very young, and then mom migrated after she got married.
My grandfather came to this country after World War II. So he was in the merchant navy, and at that time, because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of the Bangladeshis and from the Indian subcontinent, the British welcomed that trade of people to come and work in the factories and stuff.
He was mainly working in factories, various types of factories.
They gave out vouchers in Sylhet region back then in Bangladesh, and he got one of them, and he was employed with a factory up north somewhere. My dad can't remember the city's name, as you can imagine. He actually never came to Birmingham. It was a city in north, the factory that sponsored him, and then eventually he made his journey down to Birmingham.
I mean, 1962, I'm in Khorasan, colonial hospital.
Employment exchange Islam Sylhet, Tahrir Kuziyaki. তো তারা দিল এক ফর্ম যে ওটা লন্ডন মিনিস্ট্রি অফ লেবারও ওটা ফিল আপ করে হটাই দিলে তুমি লন্ডন যাইবাইনি বলে হয় চান্স চাইলে তো যাইব
তুমি আইসো 65 একটা মেয়ে লোক আসলো না বাংলাদেশি আইসো আমার মনে হয় 10-15 বছর বাদে আমি উদ্দেশ্য আবার এখন 10 বছর বাদ দিকে 15 বছর বাদে
I came to this country in 1970. I was 16. I came with parents, yes.
London থেকে আইলাম বার্মিংহাম কাম করলাম এটা উইভিং কাপড় বাইন করে উইভিং মেশিনও নাই আমি বমিন লাগাইতাম কাপড় তো বাইনি তো মাথা বাইতে বমিন লাগাইতো না
My father, he was a army man, non-commissioned army officer back home during Second World War. He fought in Burma front. So he had the opportunity to come to UK.
I was a social worker, social welfare
College of Social Welfare in Bangladesh, master degree. I had that social work degree from there. That was the American oriented, not the casework system like this country. More of community work, more of group work, you see. So it was very much interesting. And they wanted to introduce that sort of system in this country as well. So it was, when I came to this country, straight away I got the job.
And Bangkok Sahri asi. And thin Bangkok Sahri asi tan. Bangkok commercial Bangkok United Bank. O thin Bangkok Marbudi Tanya as supervisor. Tanya malu yazi thaki. I'm to go a hantam buya. Pochin datamna. Hari hantam Tanya malu yazi thaki.
Mom didn't do any work, no. Mom was very dependent on Dad. Yeah, she didn't do any work at all.
Mana nata tena ni bar dapsina.
Yeah, she didn't even go out.
Goro punyasla.
Bano pehla zawo kunni.
Oh, to hano hoira. Mone ami jo tohan rasta mi sinni aki. Tohan amar gortone bari amar rasta mi sinni.
That's what she asked me for today, to hear a bus pass.
Sinchi no le han bas fat mar
She's getting independent, you know.
Am ta od bedi loge kuna daito le wanisto bar sano. The starting to hoiba bas karta ate ayu ate.
Single highways of horse hoiba desho ke lai. Ibar aile ibar hollai. Ekgoro bhat choijon takam to. Ami jegulo apnar husband don. Dagmon udasin amra 25 জন takam. Rummo takam 6 জন 3 জন. To kheuge lagi rat kor amar kheu din amma udaki.
Goro number fota hortarna. Aya hawaita kila. To eat dia sucha. Eat chinran. To eat याद कितना करते हैं आरो किसका आरो ये थोड़ा ये होकरो सामने था ईट इंदा यारी होकरो लो मारा फुलेना सब ये लो है वाले जो किता तुम्हें किता था तो बुझे ना कुछ वैसे सॉरी उदाम तो सॉरी कोई यारी आई के
আমি ইংরেজি আইছিলাম
এখন তো বহুত উন্নত এখন তো ঘরে ঘরে ডিগ্রি একটা ঘরে ঘরে ফুরিন হুয়াইন এটা আগে তো আসছিল না সব আইসিল যারা এরা তো আনলেক আনফট এরা লেখাপড়া জানতাম না
ভবিষ্যৎ বহুত কথা বহুত ভালো এখানে আগে যেন একটা দিন গেছে আর কি আমি বোধ পাইছি এই দিনটা খুব কষ্ট গেছে মানুষের আর কি এখন তো আমরা ঘুরে ঘুরে মাশাআল্লাহ
majority because we were as you might say the second generation of the Bengali community in UK so majority of the guys around us were into the restaurant trade some that were bright they managed to make it into professional jobs but mostly it was the restaurant trade. So people around me, they were leaving school, very rarely going to college, going straight into full-time restaurant jobs and etc.
At the time, that was the first choice because most of the Bengalis into restaurant trade and that's the first thing everybody look at. Now, alhamdulillah, everyone's got more experience. It's the second, third generation coming up. Everyone moving to different direction.
I used to get picked up on Coventry Road by a van and used to get picked up at 4 o'clock and by the time we'd get home it would be 4 or 5 in the morning so we never seen the night if you know what I mean so we were inside awake.
That's the backbone. My dad was in it, my parents, uncles, everybody was in it and a lot of our peers, even the guys who are doing really well now, we've all got that trade to sort of either fall back on or thank for it.
Because I was a loud big mouth in the family, she always used to say, oh, you know, for a Bengali woman, oh, you talk too much, and I used to always have an opinion on everything, and I used to always get told off, because when there was like community meetings, I never liked the way our community operated. So I used to always say, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that, and my mom would go, chup, you sit in the corner. I'm thinking, no, I disagree with everything that our community does in the UK right now. And she used to say, well, if you want to have a voice, you got to get yourself educated. You need to be something important to be identified and recognized for your voice and well respected. And to do that, you've got to put your education and your career first before anything else. And this was my mother. She says, I couldn't do it because I was too busy raising you kids. But now that you got an opportunity in UK, I want you to do the adapt adapt, mix with other people, become something of yourself.
So I started stammering since I was 4 years old, so a very, very young age. And I knew that any sort of job would be quite difficult for me. Well, I thought that. And I remember the time that I really wanted to go into teaching, I started doing a lot of research from the major 15. And I used to go into a lot of government trained to teach events. So they basically big events across the major cities where people from the Department for Education, they come and advise you on how to become a teacher. And it's a real story. I think I was having a very bad day with my speech that day, and I was speaking to one of the government advisors, and he actually said, have you considered a different career? I was a bit confused. I was like, I'm come to a teaching event, why would I? And he goes, I can tell that, that you're finding it very difficult to speak fluently, and you need to talk for 99% of the time in teaching, so you might find this quite difficult. Of course, at that point, I was quite taken back, because this is an official advisor advising me maybe teaching is not the best career for me. Of course, I didn't listen to him.
I looked around, and there was around thousands I saw Indians, but one Bengali guy, many years later, I found out he's in another department in housing, many years later. And then later I introduced some of my friends to the company as well. But it was quite apparent, you are the only one, so you're doing something right. You look around and there's hardly any Bangladeshis.
Back then, you didn't have a choice. It's either work in a factory or, I don't know, do a cleaning job or do something really low paid. But now, because everybody got educated, and even though my dad was educated, but when you come to England, it's not the same opportunities. You can't have a high job back then because it didn't exist, especially for being a Bangladeshi and your colour of your skin, unfortunately. But yeah, working in the community is. So that's why Dad's passion was, working for the community, for people because they didn't know how to read or write, and Dad felt, well, they need to, and he did encourage a lot of people to go into education, do this, do that, because I remember back in 1978, and Saathi House in Aston, because that was close to where I lived, and that was the first women's organisation. So all the men there were doing an uproar. Oh my God, there's going to be a women's centre. There's a lot of women there. I'm not telling my wife to go there because they're going to get corrupt. So Dad sat all the men down. I remember the man sat all the men down and says, "Don't do that. Is there a centre for women? And if women want to get educated, there's no harm in that. So you should let your wives go, your sisters go."
My working life started straight after college, as I said. I worked for government at that time, and I was in a very comfortable job. I was a senior manager. And I created a job slightly higher than my position, and I thought I would automatically get that job. But my manager recommended my assistant for the promotion rather than me, even though I take over from him when he's on annual leave, which really hurt me. And I thought, you know what, I'm not valued here. So I applied for a job higher than my manager, and I got the job. And I moved on, and since then I have just moved on, and I became the first female director of an international company. It's a FTSE 250 company, employs over 70,000 people. I got the recognition because I won a £150 million project by 0.4%, which shook the company.
Obviously, from a small age, I've been going to my dad's restaurant or takeaway, the chippy. As a small age, I've been looking, observing, what he's been doing and what the staff do. I've been going from a small age, seeing what happens in a restaurant day to day. And obviously, for the future, it'll benefit me because I've gained skills and knowledge from these experiences that will benefit me in the future for me to run my own business.
We're in sort of the fourth generation now. We're seeing more and more of them going into professional jobs or even different things. They're moving away, they're moving abroad, they're moving out of Birmingham. And I think that they see that. I mean, London's really aspiring. A lot of them, even I know of relatives who've moved into London. They've gone to Dubai, they've gone to Egypt. I think it's like within, as a community, we're expanding. And obviously I could see my kids are still fairly young, they're still at school. They're looking at that, they're looking at the aspiring Bangladeshis out there and thinking, wow, I want to become that. So I don't think it's really professional. I think they want to explore.
Bangladesh, there's a lot of farming, the farming industry, crops, etc. My father was in a really horrific accident where they call them tractors, but I think it's some sort of harvesting crop vehicle with blades. But he basically became caught up in one of those with his, you know, in Bangladesh, in this country, we were lungis. One of these became wrapped up and he had a horrific injury, his leg down to his bone. It lost all the soft tissue, blood everywhere. Brought back to what is our Bari, and carried in something, transferred to the hospital, or the closest hospital at the time. And, you know, I remember that the doctors basically demanded payment before they would treat him, or the confirmation of payment, and that stuck in my mind. You know, I thought, look at this. You know, before they think about saving somebody's life, they're asking for payment, and inshallah, I want to be in a position where maybe I can help people. I didn't think about being a doctor specifically at that time because I was too young to formulate those thoughts.
The measure will be by what my kids do. So from what my parents had, you know, to what I have, that's like in a generation. The measure of success will be by the kind of attainment the third generation, so my children will do. So in order to say, I mean, definitely we've come very far in terms of my generation. There's, you know, I can name lots of people who are, alhamdulillah, mashallah, doing very well. But in terms of what this conversation with this head teacher, going back to them, is, you know, does the third generation do a U-turn?
I've got a business degree, and he's a third generation in this country. The future holds for the Bangladesh is very, very bright at the moment, because most kids are very well educated, qualified, and I think they're a very good future.
But I just thought we're still not doing enough, because we've got the qualification, but we're still unemployed. I know a lot of kids nowadays, and this is why I'm getting heavily involved with my college, is because we've got the qualification, but we're still not employable. Why? It's because we probably don't want a minimum wage, because we've got the strain at home, because not everyone's from a wealthy background. Our community is still deprived, as you know. Not everybody is a good earner, like the main bread household, the parents. They're still, so the younger generation are still feeling the pinch of finance. And what's happening is they're putting their academics to a side, and they're so focused on what pays them quick. And because they're doing that, they're losing their opportunities to really become an academics. And the reason why I find our communities are suffering more than any other is because, unfortunately, even our elders, I think we live beyond our means now, and our financial pressure is making us not get what we need in life. Like, for example, as I was an accountant, I remember earning $5,000 a year. That was hard work.
You know, if you did statistics and so on, and I know what all the statistics say about unemployment and so on, but most people work. You know, out of 100, I think anybody who's of eligible age, 95% work. But that won't be shown up in statistics. But we have an aptitude for work. You know, we have come from poverty to do well. I've come from poverty, you know, and my drive hasn't diminished. I want to do well for myself. More importantly, I want to do well for my children.
It's amazing. I mean, look what they've got compared to what we had, well, what I had back. I mean, I think, you know, the potential for the young generation is amazing, right? I mean, they're at the same caliber as any other youngsters of their time, whether they're English or Pakistani or Indian, right? You know, we have come a long way for us, we've really come a long way. Because one thing you got to remember was us Bangladeshis were the last of the Asians that came to this country.
Definitely when we were growing up, it was very much you get a job, either you go into business and you do go into restauranting, or you become the lawyer, doctor, engineer, blah, 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 blah. But you have your strict kind of path to follow because you've got to settle down, you've got to make it work, you've got to make your life work. But then, we're a very artistic nation. Like, our history is full of poem, it's full of song.
In terms of integrating, I think generations have changed over time. I think the first, I would say like my granddad's generation, it was more coming here and trying to settle and trying to kind of make a means, make a living, help the family back home. That was always that kind of ideology. I think with my dad's generation, it started to become about how do we integrate into the community? How, end of the day, we are British, our kids are British. How do we kind of entangle that almost sense of ownership of who we are? And I think that's something that changed within generation, because suddenly there were things that dad was doing that granddad's generation wasn't doing, and now I see it now in like my generation, the things that we do which dad's generation didn't necessarily do. And it's not to say that it's not good or is good that we're doing it, it's more the fact that the times are changing and society's changing, communities around us are changing. In terms of looking at the arts, I want to say that, and I'm going to say this personally from my experience, it's not generalization on all Bengali people, but I feel like as a community, people struggle to accept the arts. And I see a lot because, I was the only woman of color on my photography degree while I was studying it. I teach now and I barely see any South Asian kids studying it. And it's not to say that they don't want to. Sometimes it is just simply family pressure that, it's not something that's going to give you a job at the end of it, so they won't do it. So I think as a community, we need to start understanding that there are many, many different ways of, making a living. There are many different ways of what the 9-to-5 job is changing. I mean, things like COVID right now has changed the 9-to-5 job aspect so much. People working from home, which was impossible at one point. So things like that, I feel like have really changed the way that we see the arts as a whole, but see different kind of career movements. I think academically there are many, many different career forms, whether it's like, becoming a doctor or becoming a lawyer, that, will always be seen in a high position. And it's not to say that they aren't, they definitely are. But I think it's also to accept the fact that, if your children or the children after you or a different generation is trying to make a living out of something that isn't normal to you, it's not to say that it's not allowed. It's just the fact that just because you haven't heard of it, it's not that we can't do it. So I think as a community, that's something that we need to really deepen our understanding of, but also think about how, there are many, many different fields out there.
I think there's a different time, and also the difference in economies as well. So the economy going back in the 50s and the 60s were a lot of industry-based, industrial. Now that sector is no longer, So it's, people who have degrees, they've been really doing well in the 80s, 90s and the early 2000s. But now the market's changing. It's not just about if you got a master's degree or not, It's about what experience that you could bring in to the workplace. And I think that, the Bangladeshi community will do really, really well moving forward. The sector that has actually helped the Bangladeshi community is the restaurant trade, the catering trade, because yes, I started in that trade when I was really, really young. Had several opportunities to move into the trade as, owners or business owners, things like that. But I never did that, never took it on. And that sector has helped a lot of people move up in terms of social status is probably one thing, but the social ladder itself, in terms of, having a good life.
My grandfather was a ship merchant and just trying to get into this country to work in a factory, and then eventually moved back. But then my father was working in the restaurant industry, which was really tough at the time, very long shifts, and to then me becoming a teacher and getting nationally getting a national award for the best new teacher of the year. I think that just shows the difference that the Bangladeshi community has made in 40 years. And I think, if we can achieve that in the space of 40 years, that just shows that we can achieve a lot more in the next 10 to 20 years.
Educate, but just not on a formal level, but also on an informal level. Learn from those that are younger than you and older than you. Sit in however different many circles you can, and always grow. Do something every day that can empower your growth, whether it's reading a book, spending time with someone that you've met for the first time and that's got a profound story. Just do something in your life that can help you grow on a day-to-day basis.